Hello everybody, it's Joe and I'm back with Star Wars Unlimited. I always enjoyed making budget decks, but what is a budget deck? Is it like 50 euros or USD? Is it 20? Is it 10? What is actually the cheapest deck you can make? I ended up using only cards which I got for 2 cents. And if you look closely, you realize most of the Rebel cards are actually available for 2 cents. And that makes Leia a pretty amazing $1 princess. So the grand total for the deck is €1 and 4 cents for 50 cards, 1 leader and 1 base. So what are the cards? You are missing some of the fancier cards like K2SO and Red 3, but there is still quite a lot to work with. So of course we have Leia as our leader, we have Tarkin Town as our base, and I will discuss the 30 HP base in a little bit. On the ground we have Bentic 2 tubes, we have enough red cards to be able to trigger the ability of giving another friendly red card in rate 2 during an attack, which is pretty nice. We have a We have a spec for soldier, which is basically pretty nice synergy with Bentic, because if you put 2 1-drops on first turn, you can trigger the Leia's ability in the second, but you don't have to really force this, it's just nice when it happens. We have Battlefield Marine, which is amazing card for 2 resources. We have one Motma, which works of course very well with the Rebel cards. We have Rebel Pathfinder. I find this card a little bit less interesting when I draw it, but it's still pretty good card. We have Sabine of course, which is pretty good card by itself, and it's also Rebel, so that really fits the team we have here. We have Eco-Base Defender, Fighters for Freedom. Again, there is enough red cards to trigger the red synergy, often enough. We have Fleet Lieutenant, which is of course amazing card to push few more damage in either base or some unit, but sometimes you will find it a little bit difficult to play together with Leia, because Leia already forces two attacks at once, but still pretty handy card. We have General Dodona, which is basically in place of K2SO, and it is arguably slower card than K2SO, but the Rebel synergy is very good, so it works pretty well in the deck. We have Zep, which is again a little bit slower card, but when you manage to attack with Zep, you can like wipe quite a lot of things off the board in one swing, which is pretty good. We have Giral Attack Pod, and the last ground unit is Rogue Squadron Skirmisher. Let me scroll a little bit to show you the whole card. For the space units, we have a set of Alliance X-Wings, we have Green Squadron A-Wings, which is pretty nasty card. We have Wing Leaders, which really help you to push few more damage with the experience tokens. And the last one is Bright Hope. Again, a little bit slower card, but pretty nice value for money and for the resources. When you look at the events, you can see we only have one set of Medal Ceremony and 1 set of Rebel Assault. And that sort of frees your hand to play more units, which is really helpful with Leia. But there are other cards you can put in the deck if you really want to play more events. So that brings us to the sideboard. This is not exactly a sideboard, these are other options you have to put in the deck, and depending on that you would be able to create like fully functional sideboard, but keep these only as a options to like tweak the main deck or maybe put more copies in the sideboard. You can work with more copies of Bentic or Spec for Soldier. For the events you can play Tactical Advantage, Carbast, Keep Fighting and Strike Through. All of these can be found again for 2 cents, so they fit in our budget. We have Jedi Agitators, Mon Mothma, you can use more copies, but I find that the card is a little bit slow usually, so I think that 1 or 2 copies is enough in the deck. And you can play around with Rogue Squadron Skirmisher if you want to have few more cards at the top end of the resource curve. And the card is pretty good value for money and for the resources again, because Ambush is quite helpful if you really need to clean something off the board. And also you get some free 2-cost unit from the discard pile in your hand when you play the card, and you will have quite a lot 2-cost cards in the deck. So how do you play with this deck? It is pretty simple. You have Leia and you have all the rebels, so go nuts. Basically, there's not too much you can do wrong with the deck. The lack of events just lets you play all the units, and you use Leia's ability to trigger 2 attacks at once with your rebels and win the value or phase game depending on the type of the deck you are playing against. So you basically focus on having 2 units ready to attack next turn, and you can make pretty big swings like that. When you are playing against aggro deck, you are basically a aggro deck, there's no working around that. But when you are playing against aggro, you are missing some of the key cards which push extra damage through, like K2SO or Red 3, and you will probably not win the phase or base race with other aggro deck. So you should focus a little bit more on controlling the board and having some favorable trades. You have some cards that will help you with that, like General Dodona or Bright Hope, and you can force the more advantageous trades on your part to control the board and finish the game on your terms. Just beware of some cards like U-Wing Reinforcement, which can make quite a huge swing at turn 7. When you are playing against a slower deck, some midrange or control, you want to win the value game, and you should work like a standard aggro deck and finish the base as fast as you can. Some extra tips when you use Rebel Assault on Leia, you also trigger Leia's ability, and I mean Leia now as a deployed leader, and that actually lets you attack with 3 units at once, which can make quite a big swing. If you start the game with 2 1-drops, that lets you use Leia's ability on the second turn already, which is quite a huge advantage, but don't force like mulligan for this setup. It's really nice when you have it, but if you have something else to play, don't worry about it and just play it. If you are playing against aggro or you are trying to control a board a little bit, if you play Zep on turn 5 or on 5 resources, and then you play Rogue Squadron Skirmisher on 6 resources, you can wipe quite a lot of the board because Rogue Squadron Skirmisher has ambush, and Zep can like usually wipe 2 units quite easily when it completes the attack, so that's pretty nice. Possible changes and sideboard. I have already mentioned the sideboard listed is not exactly a sideboard, it's like options you could try and put more or less in the deck or the actual sideboard depending on your preferences. But one thing you can consider is using Tarkin Town versus 30 HP base. In some matchups, the Tarkin Town ability of dealing 3 damage to damage non-leader unit didn't really come into play, and I was basically missing those 5 HP in the end. The bad thing about Tarkin Town is that it doesn't work on leaders, and usually when you are playing against aggro deck, the only complicated thing to remove is the leader, because other units are usually pretty low on HP already. So yeah, it's questionable whether this card is helpful to you, because against control decks you usually try to focus more on the base and not that much on controlling the board. So this is the deck, this is the $1 princess. Let me know what you think about the deck, and whether you think there are some other cards you could put in the deck to fit the theme of 2 cents and rebels, or maybe there are some non-rebel cards which could really fit in the deck. Maybe let me know, and also let me know whether you want to see some other budget decks on the channel. And with that, that's all from me today, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!